Okay, so we're 11 o'clock now. We'll
Yeah,
start going if we can. My name's Howard Redwood. Good morning, everybody. I've been looking at the chats, and you all seem to be scattered all over the country, which is good. Hope you can hear us and see us. Sorry for last week's problem we had. I know Carly sent out an email to apologise, but we had the system crash about 5 minutes before we were due to go live. For those of you who didn't see last week's webinar on returning to work, it is on the Academy, the DIA Academy. It was recorded. We did get it going in the end. It was about a quarter of an hour late, so it did go on for a little while, but it is on the Academy. So for those of you who haven't seen that, it would be well worth you looking at that, because this presentation, it wasn't intended, but does actually tie up to it very well. So have a chance, if you get a chance, have a look in the Academy at the Returning to Work post-lockdown webinar that we did last week. So what we're going to do is to talk today about the PPE, that's personal protective equipment, which is bandied about a lot in the press at the moment. Carl, if you can move on to the next slide, please, if you will.
yeah, no problem.
So first thing, the aim of the session is talking about preparing to return to work. We did this last week, but we're going to go into it in a little bit more detail about you in the vehicle, and do an overview, which Carl is going to do, of personal protective equipment, why we need it, how we use it, and what some of it is, which Carly's got samples of, so we can see that as well. This is the reason why we've got the full screen going today. So if you can move on, please, Carly, if you will. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so preparing to work. Again, as we mentioned last week, the very first thing we've got to do is to make sure you're fit. The coronavirus is still around. Thankfully, we've got less people passing away through it, but there's still some there nonetheless. It's going to be a while until we've got the whole thing sorted. What we're looking at is still ensuring that we protect our own households. So although you might feel well, we were talking last week about the safety bubble. You have to ensure that the safety bubble doesn't just include you, it includes the household you're coming out of every day, and what risk there is from the household you come from, what you are putting into your vehicle in terms of cross-contamination, and how that could possibly affect anybody who gets into your car. So what you need to consider is that anybody getting into your car for training is effectively a household getting into your car. So we have to look at the risks from both sides. So first thing first is, are you fit to work? We are pretty aware of the symptoms of coronavirus. There has been the symptom which the NHS have said about the loss of taste and smell. That isn't actually a new symptom. There was another app which came out called C19, done by the King's College Hospital, which has been out for well over a month, and that was one of their first things that they had on there. So for this to be suddenly big news is a bit strange to me, but there are several things to look out for. Most of all is the cough and high temperature, and the link that we have here on the screen does actually cover everything that you would need to look for you and your household, to ensure that you are not spreading or being a risk yourself. There is mental health to consider as well. You may have been a volunteer somewhere, come across some situations that have shocked you and thought you'd never experience in your life, which could be causing a bit of a mental effect on you in terms of anxiety. So again, you're going to make sure you're ready to return to work. Grieving is one thing. If unfortunately you may have lost a member of your family, and our condolences to you if you have, but that can take quite a strain for some time in many different guises, and therefore you have to be assured that you are able to cope with the situation that you have been in, and bear in mind that while you're in the car, that you will get students of different ages, different life experiences, who have also been through life experiences that by something they say to you could actually bring back a lot of raw emotion to you. Are you ready to receive that? Because it will happen.
If you if you wanted to have a chat about that, don't think that the help desk is only something you can ring up for advice on your standards check and things like that, or in this crisis, things like financial advice. If you're really worried and you just want to chat with somebody, we don't hold out there that we are qualified counsellors, but we are a listening ear. And if you did feel you needed some extra help, we are aware of resources that we can point you onto. And all of us have had a brush with mental health issues in our family or ourselves. We've all had times in our life where we've needed to talk to somebody about them. So we don't want anybody to feel alone if they're feeling anxious or their well-being has been impacted, as naturally a lot of people have during this crisis. And that is something that's worrying you about going back to work as well.
Yeah, we don't mind you thinking of DIA as a family, to be honest. I mean, that's what we'd like to be. We are here to help you for a whole wide range of things. And if you do have anxiety problems through little hang-ups you have through training or things that have happened to you, which has really happened out of the blue, and you're not sure how to cope with it, or where you need to get help for it, whether it be financial, etc., there's no harm in asking us. If we can help, we'll certainly help. And there's many areas that we can direct you to, as Carly's just said. But also at the bottom there, the skills. There are some people that will be sitting, listening to this now and thinking, I feel uneasy about a certain aspect of the syllabus that they train when they're training learners, or it could be something they've got a job that's lined up in terms of fleet that is waiting to happen but can't be unlocked yet, and they have some issues about how they need to cope with that. Then please get in touch with us. We can help you with CPD. We can help you to talk through situations that you're getting in training, even if it's things like approaching roundabouts, or you've got a certain problem that a student produces to you and it's something you haven't seen before. Don't be afraid to give us a call. It's quite likely we can do a lot to help you with it. So if you can move on, please, Carly.
Yeah.
So preparing for work, I mean, we're talking about the very first thing is you, but also a health check of your pupils returning to work. And you need to make sure they are. And I know we're talking about preparing for, we're talking about protective equipment here, but this is also part of the protection strategy at the same time. It's not all about what you wear. It's about putting interventions in place to reduce risk. Clothing does that, but being prepared does it as well. So we have to consider PPE as this being part of your equipment in order for you to be able to return safely. So the health check of your pupils, you need to be aware of what symptoms they have either themselves, or if they are shielding people in the family. The shielding is a new word that's being used for people that are at either of the two high-risk categories, who are at home, who have been told to stay at home because they are a high risk. Is that student coming out of that environment? And then we have to weigh up the risks of whether they should be trained or whether they shouldn't be trained. That's going to be done through you making a phone call to them when we know when we can return. Really should be keeping in touch with the students now and just touching base and saying, look, we still haven't got the nod to go yet, or just keep in touch and let them know what's happening, so they keep sticky to you and they'll come back to you. But they may also have health problems of grievances. It is very, very good really for you to listen to that and advise that perhaps, although they're raring to get in the car and think that going out in the car and training is going to solve all their problems, you having a lot more life skills than a lot of the youngsters have, it might be you might have to act as a surrogate dad or a surrogate mum momentarily and say, look, really and truly, let's just give it a couple more weeks. I know you're bursting to get out, but let things take their course. You've probably got a funeral to go to, or there's things to sort out. Let them have that time first, and just advise them in a professional manner. Reassurance is really one of the best things you can give them, that the driving test will still be there for them, the roads will still be there, they're not going to go away, they'll still be able to drive. They're going to lose probably a couple of weeks of their life not driving. Well, they've already had 17 years plus of not driving. A couple more weeks is not really going to make any difference. So you can move on, please, Carly.
Now, is everybody seeing a new slide now, your vehicle? Because some people were saying that the slide was stuck. The two slides were just like very similar. One was for pupils, one was for AGIs. So that might have made it look like it was stuck to you. But we should be on your vehicle now, right? Enough people are saying, yes, they can see it. So carry on, Howard.
Good. Okay, good. So we've everyone's still with us. That's great. Okay, so now last week we spoke about doing the cleaning of the vehicle, and I'm sorry to keep referring back to last week for those people who didn't see the seminar last week. But what we're going to ask you to do now is to intrinsically clean the vehicle before you start using it. That will come out on the next few slides, but it's incredibly important you do this because you have to try and get a vehicle that is as sanitized as possible before you start, for your protection and the protection of the people that get into the car. And I mean deep clean it, inside and out. And I'm going to go through what you need to do for the inside bit by bit in just a second. There is a link there for the COVID-19. Now, the gov.uk has produced this only recently. I think it came out on the 15th of May. Cleaning in a non-healthcare setting. We hear a lot about the healthcare settings, but there's cleaning in a non-healthcare setting. And the next slides that come along is what we've taken from that in order to look at your work environment, which is a non-healthcare setting, and what you'll need to do. You will really need to use gloves and an apron. Okay, if you've got a disposable apron, great, but if you haven't, use something that's going to protect your clothing because of the materials you need to use. When you finish doing the cleaning, the deep cleaning of the car, then put the clothes in the washing machine on the highest setting you can if you're not wearing disposable apron. So that's perfectly okay to do. The C19 virus doesn't like extreme heat. That is why we look at temperatures that are 37.8. Anything above that, it doesn't like it. So putting your clothes on a 40 wash, if they're able to do a 40 wash and above, will do what the clothes will get the stuff out the clothes that it needs to do, providing you use the right detergents for it. Okay, so if you could move on, please, Carly. Okay, so consideration when you're driving. With a bleach-free disinfectant, we've been talking a lot about hand sanitizing and sanitizing wipes, etc. Yes, they are very useful and they should be used between students. So when you actually have a student get into the car, you would clean the vehicle because you've just driven to the site to pick them up. So in between students and driving, you would use your anti-bac wipes, etc. But this is the deep clean we're talking about now before you even start. And it should be a bleach-free disinfectant, not neat, and certainly not with a wet cloth, because remember, you're going to be wiping over surfaces where drips could get into electrics. So it's got to be a mildly damp cloth as opposed to a wet cloth doing this. Okay, this is why you must wear gloves. So take consideration of what you can see from the driver's seat. So anything you can see from the driver's seat, whether it's a contact point or not, should be wiped down. So you're looking steering wheel, a horn, anything that's attached to the steering wheel that controls infotainment controls. It contains your radio, sat navs, the Bluetooth phone, etc. The stalks on either side of the steering wheel or wherever they are for your indicators and lights, etc. Ignition or power button if you don't turn on with a key. The key itself should be wiped over. If it's one that actually flips out, then wipe the stem of the metal of the key as well, because that will get touched by people too. And if you've had other members of your family driving the car, then you definitely need to wipe all this down. Air vents for the passenger and where you are, and the central air vents too. All the air vents that you can see, that you can reach from the driver's seat, all need to be wiped over quite thoroughly. Gear stick, the radio and your infotainment devices, and the heating controls as well. Also, the pull and the actual seat adjustment buttons for moving your seat, whether it's electrical, whether it's the lever underneath your legs normally, make sure that's wiped as well. And also the seat belt buckle and clasp too, especially on the driver's one, because that's always going to get held. Everyone's got to touch that. If we could move on, please, Carly.
Yeah, and just asking Chris question. People are saying, why use bleach-free disinfectant? Because ammonia-based products can damage the car's interiors. The plastics that modern cars are made out of, like the dash, some of the central consoles, and also if you've got leather seating or synthetic leather seating, will be faded and damaged by anything that has ammonia if you're using it over time. And given that you're going to increase the amount of times you're cleaning your car with these agents, they're going to get more damaged over time by using ones that have got ammonia in them.
Yeah, this has actually come from reports from, I believe, from Mercedes and Ford, actually, which came to light yesterday. So this is why bleach-free disinfectant is the way forward. Okay. So if we can move on to, should say, boot and other, the next slide, Carly.
People
That's the
are
one.
also
Oh, hang
saying,
on, sorry. All seats. That's right. All seats it should be.
yeah,
Okay. All seats. So again, seatbelt and clips, as we said, adjustment controls, headrests, seat pockets. The seat pockets do harbour and can harbour quite a lot of nasties. This is actually specifically mentioned in the report when this came out. Seat pockets and also door pockets was another one too. So roof handles, door handles and releases, door pockets, window switches, interior lights, grab handles, everything on that list needs to have a wipe over. So it's all quite thorough. You can see it's quite intrinsic.
think
And
if
we
you
say,
I think if you have a child and you're a busy parent who's like working and having children, I think we have to be careful about not being the next Wuhan. Because if you've ever seen my car, I think there are unfound, undiscovered epidemic diseases in my door handles and releases and in my door pockets. There's so much rubbish in there.
we'll just leave that where it is, Carly. Okay. Now, you see at the top of the slide there, within 72 hours. If you know when you're going to start doing your training, this should be done within 72 hours of going out on the road. If you do it longer than 72 hours, you may have to do this again because of the time that the effects of the disinfectant has on surfaces. The earlier you do this before you go on the road, the less effect the intrinsic cleanliness of your car will be. So really, certainly not before 72 hours of going out. And once you have done this, ideally, you don't want any members of your family to use the vehicle. So it has to be family free as soon as this deep clean's been done. Okay, so we can move on, please. We should now see boot and other. Okay, so parcel shelf in the boot. And in a lot of cars, where the wheel well is for the spare wheel, you've got a little flap that lifts up. You want to make sure you get that as well. If you want to spray the wheel well as well underneath, there shouldn't be too much problem with stuff underneath that false floor, but certainly the boot tab and everything in the boot. And we're talking about glove box, and it says logbook there. Everything that you keep in the glove box needs to come out and be wiped over. And go back in the glove box again if you want to keep it there. But you might think that everything is all safe. But the thing is, the glove box is not a waterproof intrinsic device. There's a gap behind it normally, and therefore it can harbour all sorts of nasties, and therefore it should be wiped inside and out, and everything inside should also come out. Central storage lockers you've got, which sometimes you've got between the seats behind the parking brake, the handbrake. You've got a central storage thing there. That all needs doing too. Cup holders, especially the ones that spring out from inside a hiding place, and the bonnet release lever on which you pull from inside the vehicle. That should also be, and also where you've got a boot release lever. I've got a boot release lever next to my seat in my car. That would need doing as well.
Howard,
Okay.
what about disposable car seat covers? Is that just adding more faff and complexity, another thing to do, or do you think there's a value in using disposable seat covers?
You can use disposable seat covers, but what I'd say there is that you must make sure you are fully clothed and you're not in shorts or t-shirts, etc., because the contact from skin to those surfaces, if they're not wiped down or destroyed properly, can stay there for up to 72 hours. This is why we're using the bleach-free disinfectant, not before 72 hours. So, yeah, you can get them and throw them away. There's no reason why you can't, but ideally, they would need to be thrown away after every use in that seat. So that means if you've got a student that gets in, you've driven there, it would have to be thrown away. Change it for the student gets out, throw it away. You get back in the car again to get to the next student's place, you'd have to throw the next one away. So you're going to get through an awful lot of them.
Yeah. And one person is asking, why do we need to do this if the car's not been used for 6 weeks? I think it just would be good to start carrying out this procedure. I think students will also want to get into a car on that first lesson, that they can even have the reassurance of smelling that it's been clean and seeing that it's most been recently wiped down. I think we've all had that experience of getting on public transport when it hasn't been clean for a while. I don't want to get on any planes when we start flying again that I don't feel have been cleaned, even if they were cleaned before they were parked up on the runway for months. It's just not going to happen in those professional settings, that they won't give them a good clean over again before they get back to using them.
Yeah, you do need to have a starting block really with this, and start them clean, and then they are easier to maintain clean. So really, professionally, we should go with clean cars anyway. Yes, you might have cleaned it. It's been sat still for 6 weeks, but you can guarantee it's dusty. In 6 weeks' time, sitting there for 6 weeks with the sun shining through the window, etc., you will harbour dust from the seats, etc. It does need a bit of a clean.
Chris makes a good point that you see nurses wearing short sleeves whilst using PPE in intensive care. Why do
Yeah.
we cover our arms?
Because the situation with that is they have plenty of water that they can use to wash their hands and arms, and they are encouraged to use that water as much as they can. We don't have access to that on the road. And you mustn't ever go into the client's house to wash your hands, etc., after doing a lesson. The front door, going across that front door is absolutely taboo. So unless you've got copious amounts of water or sites where you can stop and continually wash your hands, they recommend a good half dozen times a day where you can actually wash your hands. That's going to be very difficult as a driving instructor to be able to wash properly. But the hospitals have got all that set up, and that's why they can do that.
I don't wish to be rude to anybody, but obviously, if you are working in an intensive care environment, you've had lots of training in even how to wash and prepare for going into the unit. This is their daily life. They've been doing it for years with multiple infection risks. So that's where they are able to do that in a way that others can't. Jim's just mentioned there are some disinfectants that kill virus contact for up to 10 days. Bacoban is a name that's been recommended. It's just making sure that that is sufficient for COVID-19. We're still, even though COVID-19 is a coronavirus and there's been coronavirus is of different types, we don't know enough about how it is in our wider community yet, just to rely on what a manufacturer says alone.
Okay. So we're moving on to the next slide, please. We should be talking about motorbikes now. A bit more difficult for these guys because doing a deep clean on those sort of vehicles is a bit of a problem for them. The normal wash down procedure for the bike before they start, if they have been left idle, would suffice. But in between use of riders, then it would be using wipes over all of these contact points. We did mention in the webinar last week, for those who haven't seen it, it will really be useful for you to go to that webinar. There is an intrinsic list of contact points that need to be wiped over with the sanitary wipes, and I think we might have it later on in this show. I'm not sure. I can't remember if I saw that or not, but definitely in the one we put on last week is an intrinsic list of what needs to be wiped over between sessions of training, when students get out and the driver gets back in again to get to the next site, and it's done again before the next student gets in. So that is available for you to be able to see. If we move, the kit, the problem we've got with motorcycle kit, what the MCIA, I believe, has produced is information on how the protective kit that's worn should be left fallow for up to 7 days after it's been cleaned. That makes it incredibly expensive for motorcycle trainers to be able to supply kit to people for CBT, etc. So really and truly, it is not an expense you're putting onto your courses to start asking the people coming for training to actually produce their own protective kit, because if they've come for you for rider training, they're going to need that kit anyway. And what's more, what better time for you to advise people to get the proper stuff they need for their use, for whatever vehicle they're using, for their exposure to risk on the road, whether they're going to need spider boards, whether they can get away with a lower quality of protection. You can advise them for exactly what they want, rather than thinking they've got to spend more money than they really need to. And then they can come with that equipment and be trained by you, and it's no cost to you, and it's not an additional burden or cost to them because they've got to buy it for their protection to use the bike anyway. So really and truly, there shouldn't be too much of a problem with the kit situation. Some people will be poorer than others in terms of bits and pieces that they're going to produce. You may have to produce the odd emergency helmet, but be sure that if the helmet is being cleaned, that you're careful of what you put on the polymer casing on the outside, because there's certain things that the COVID virus doesn't like that you cannot put on that helmet. So you're going to have to be very, very descriptive on what you clean the motorcycle helmet with. That's the only thing I can say to you. I cannot give you a brand name of what to use, because the way the bike helmets are produced depends on the manufacturer as to what products they use for the polymers. So you'd have to research each helmet manufacturer as what can be used.
Fiona has a question. How often should the deep clean element be done?
Well, really and truly, in this environment now, we're talking about the new norm. And I would say this has got to be done minimum of weekly now, until we know that coronavirus has completely gone away. But there again, there's going to be another virus around the corner sometime or other. So the cars, as we know, should be cleaned in a professional, to keep yourself looking professional. It is, they say first impression. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and therefore the vehicle should be clean all the time. And really and truly, this, I think, ought to be incorporated now and adopted now as your new norm and part of working. Just be careful that you look at the surfaces to make sure that what you're doing for cleaning is not starting to affect the surfaces by doing it too often, but certainly weekly. And I'd definitely say that a hint to people using their vehicles inside of glass in the summer, low sun, dapple effect, all inside glass should always be cleaned at a minimum of fortnightly with soap and water anyway, and cleaned off with a lint-free cloth. The air vents always allow in road grime and dust, and if you've got low sun, it's why it looks like that you're looking through fog, even if you don't smoke in the vehicle. So the glass should be cleaned really often. So if you incorporate all of this into your cleaning regime, I think that the deep clean should be done weekly, and possibly inside glass as well, but the inside glass a minimum of fortnightly.
And this is our advice, people. We cannot tell you what to do. We don't have a jurisdiction over your business. So you will make your own decisions about what level you enter into this. We are obviously going to be advising them on a best practice basis. So we would think that this is what we would do, but obviously others will make their own decisions about that. And yeah, Mark, you're right. COVID-19 and actually other coronaviruses have actually been in our society for a while. There's always been that. This is the point where they're making about the new normal, is if COVID-19 has taught us something, is that we should have been protecting against contagion and infection risk in our work for a longer time. It's this whole crisis that's made us sober up to the need to adopt some of these practices into normal training life. And I know there are people out there who've always been wiping down their cars and taking risk mitigating measures because they've been ill from other different infections like flu in the past. So again, your discretion. We can only advise you what we see as best practice. Okay, do you want me to move on, Howard?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there is a lot in this next section because I've just tried to do the thing of overloading you with information rather than you going away thinking I've given you very little. So I'm not going to go through every point on every slide. That's why we'll send you the slides separately so you can go through them. I've also included in this section some links to further information. Some of it's government information, some of it is WHO, the World Health Organization. So you can do your own research and your own exploration of these topics. Just the caveat on this, well, two caveats. One is this advice will change. So, for example, as we're learning it from other countries, you can sometimes use other countries as a sight into our future here, as they're ahead of us in terms of the disease curve. So on Wednesday, Spain made it compulsory to wear face masks, for example, outside of the home if you are entering a setting where it would be impossible for you to social distance, so if you're going out into a closed public space or even open public space where you knew you wouldn't be able to social distance, you have to wear a mask, and that is for anybody up from the age of 6 years old and up. We haven't gone to that stage here in the UK, but sometimes when you're following the trajectory of the disease in other countries and how other countries react to it, you can see that some of the measures might suddenly be here in the UK as well. So the caveat is keep your eyes and ears open. Things will change and advice will change all the time. And gov.uk is a great source of advice of what's happening here. And also any PPE that's used at any time. And this was always the advice from HSC, Health and Safety Executive, even before COVID, about any equipment that you wear in your working practice. It cannot be something that creates another risk. It can't be protective equipment that then impedes your ability to do your job. And in your case, you or your pupils' ability to control the vehicle. So let's go into these slides. So understanding what PPE is needed, I think we also need to have a reiteration of what coronavirus, how it's actually transmitted. So coronavirus is primarily spread by small droplets expelled from your nose or mouth when you cough or sneeze or speak. This can be then breathed in by others, picked up from surfaces where the droplets drop, and transferred from your hand to your eyes, hence the advice about not touching our eyes or our face, nose or mouth. It doesn't transmit through skin contact on your hand per se, but rather when the bacteria enters your system through mucous membranes or respiratory droplets in close proximity. That last point is important to remember when we talk about gloves, and where the advice or viewpoint is from the medical community that gloves are not necessarily the most important piece of protection and actually cause problems in the way that people use them. So we're going to first of all start off with hand sanitizer. Obviously, the advice from health agencies like NHS England and from WHO is that hand washing is really the best defence against COVID-19. Regular, frequent, proper hand washing. They're doing it 2 times, singing happy birthday 2 times. Hot soapy water is really still the best advice about how to have good hand hygiene. And good hand hygiene is still the biggest piece of advice they give out, because it is the most effective protection. And people isolating who have symptoms, so they don't go out into the general community and spread the disease. If you're not able to wash your hands, however, you're going to use a hand sanitizer. Now, hand sanitizer, how did it work? So COVID-19 is what they call an enveloped virus. So imagine it being coated in a layer. The genetic material, the thing that goes and does the damage in our body and goes and hides in our body and then sneaks an attack on our cells and our ability to fight off the disease, is coated in a fatty known as a lipid layer. Soap's able to dissolve lipid layers, and quite a lot of COVID diseases and other infectious diseases have this lipid layer on them. So that's why soap is often suggested to combat infectious diseases. It causes the virus to actually fall apart. So once you've got through the lipid layer, which is its defense, the virus then falls apart. You've damaged its DNA, and it stops it from doing its job, which is binding to our cells and infecting them. Alcohol-based hand sanitizers work in the same way as soap. Not necessarily effective, as effective as soap and water. It depends on the hand sanitizer used and the amount of ingredients that are good at getting rid of the lipid base. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But it inactivates the virus. When it's used correctly, a hand sanitizer that has the right amount of alcohol can be really effective. So it is something that people would use in a medical setting, as well as good hand hygiene as well, hand washing. Bear in mind, if your hands are greasy or soiled, and maybe for the riders here who tend to have to tinker with their machines a little bit more often, or touch parts of the machine a little bit more often than those of you in cars, if your hands are greasy or soiled in a way, hand sanitizer's ability is a bit limited. So if you know you've been touching the engine or your wheels for any reason, or any exterior part of the car that's going to leave traces of dirt or grease on your hands, go and wash them thoroughly again. The hand sanitizer might might not be, useful. I know you might be changing a tire at the side of the road and you kind of like, what do I do in that situation? If you can get to somewhere you can wash your hands easily from there, that would be the guidance. However, whatever you can do to put multiple applications of hand sanitizer on and wipe them off with a paper towel and then hand sanitize them again is the kind of emergency response to that one. Howard, if you can see the questions in the chats, because I'm looking at the slides, can you prick up anything that anybody's asking that needs to be urgently addressed? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's no problem. Okay.
How to use hand sanitizer. Sufficient amount of gel to cover all surfaces on both hands. Fingers should be placed in the palm and then rubbed all over. There are lots of videos online. If you go on YouTube or anything like that and see that, I've also included in this presentation some links to some a big cache of resources on the World Health Organization site that has lots of advice about how to carry out hand washing, use hand sanitizer, all of those kind of things. And you can download the resources on the WHO site as well. So that's quite useful if you want things to use in your car, hand out to your pupils, all of those kind of things. The gel should be rubbed in for at least 30 to 60 seconds. And sometimes it can take 60 seconds for the gel to be effective. I think what people have noticed is that people have now got the message about spending a long time washing their hands. They've not necessarily got the message about making sure they spend an appropriate time putting hand sanitizer on. So don't do a quick job on that because you feel it's got some more magic ingredients than soap and water that'll do a more effective job. You still have to take your time about this. And it has to be rubbed in and left on both hands till they're dry for it to be effective in doing its job. But also, you know why it's got to be left to dry, because if you've ever tried to touch a steering wheel after you've had hand sanitizer on, that's obviously a very risky thing to do. Which sanitizer should be used? It's generally recommended those that are 60 to 95% alcohol based. That's what's needed to work to inactivate, i.e. cut through that fatty lipid layer and attack the virus itself. Most of the ones that have got alcohol in them contain one or more alcohols, ethanol, isopropanol, or a combination of the two. You can check the label to see how much it contains. Obviously, the greater level of it, the better. Health warning on this. Obviously, there have been press reports recently, and not surprisingly, given it's got a high alcohol content, leave it somewhere where it's not going to be in direct sunlight. Don't leave it in a warm car. Treat it like your pet dog. Don't leave it in that warm car. It'll heat up, and if you left any alcohol in a heated space, its alcohol content will reduce with the heat. And also, there have been some incidences of people leaving big containers of hand sanitizer in their car and them exploding in the car as well. Might not be a very stable brand using stable product, and that might have been the reason why, but those are some warnings that we're seeing out there. If you're talking about using the main high street brands, according to which Carex has the highest alcohol content, and their hand gel contains 70%. Cura hand gel contains about 66% ethanol, and Dettol, which is what I think President Trump must be injecting himself with every day, contains about 63% ethanol as well. So check the alcohol content on the back of the high street ones, and if they've got a good alcohol content, then they're good to go. You don't necessarily need to use a medical grade hand sanitizer. You can buy these things in bulk on things like Amazon. You can buy them in the discount centers, like Poundland sells this kind of stuff, and so do people like Savers and B&M and all of these kind of places. However, you guys probably need to buy in bulk, so you're probably better off shopping online. There's a lot of places that are selling out of stock, but if you maybe start hitting some of these links that we'll send after this to our members, which are specialists in PPE and hand sanitizing, they are used to supplying in bulk to customers, so they should have plenty of stock, and we're trying to keep an eye on that. But yeah, you're going to have to shop around, I'm afraid. There's not necessarily a magic stock somewhere, because by the time we're promoting it, it might have been promoted elsewhere and stocks might be running low as well. So when you see it and you see it at a good price and you can afford to buy it in volume, stock up on the stuff, because it's not just for COVID-19. This is stuff that you're probably going to be using now for the rest of your training career if you want to maintain good hygiene standards for you and your customers.
Carla, can I interrupt you a second, please? We've got a lot of people asking about these slides because there's a lot of information you're giving here. Yeah. Can they get copies of these slides because of the information content?
Yes, normally we only post the webinar recording in the Academy after this, and you have to kind of watch it as a program, as it were. I will put this as a slide deck that you can go through as a PDF after alongside that presentation this afternoon as well, because I realize there's a lot of things on here, and also you want to use the clickable links that I've put in here too. Those of you who are also on the key, I'll send it out to members. Those of you who are on the key worker register, I'll be sending this presentation to you guys as an update as well today. So don't worry if I'm going a bit too fast, a bit too much detail, you'll be able to pick up on that later. Non-alcohol hand sanitizers, they're usually the foams. So these are the ones that don't have alcohol in them. They have other chemical ingredients. You normally find these in the small bottles of foam. They are gentle on the skin for those of you who have got skin conditions that react badly to the alcohol-based. And a lot of us are suffering from dry hands at the moment. So we're using a lot of hand cream and getting it around it that way. However, the scientific evidence of the efficacy of the foam-based hand sanitizers varies. So just check on that product, Google it and see how effective it is. A recent study in the Journal of Hospital Medicine found the ingredients in alcohol-free hand sanitizers less effective in deactivating viruses similar to COVID. Though that study, however, looked at surfaces rather than skin contact. So just be a little bit wary of those. Read what they say about that particular foam. Read the reviews. See if there's any medical reviews of those particular brands as well, and whether they're used in a healthcare or medical setting before you invest in those. You can buy medical grade sanitizers, such as Defendol. They normally have around 70% alcohol and will have been tested in an environment to show that they can kill the pathogens, kill the disease. So they are a safe bet in terms of doing the job that they should do. So you could, there is some advice though that, and this goes for all PPE, people should think very carefully before plundering medical grade supplies, because obviously some parts of the PPE distribution chain is still not working as effectively as it should. Some areas of PPE are still hard to get hold of. So in some respects, there is advice saying try not to use medical grade stuff unless you really need to, because it could stop somebody on the front line in a healthcare role being able to access it. But there are safety equipment companies selling this stuff. There are people selling medical grade, and if you can get hold of a stock and you want to use it, it is out there.
Carly, can I interrupt again, please? We've got Alison who's asking a question. Are we saying that all cleaning the car has to be done by the ADIs and no more using car wash vanities for inside the car? I can answer that, Alison, by saying if normally when you go and have your car cleaned by the vanitors, you've normally got 4 or 5 people crawling all over it. Have you got any idea what household they've come from? When you go and do your students, you're going to phone those students and make sure they're absolutely okay. So really and truly, in this situation, all the cleaning should really be done by the ADIs, because you know where you've been. These people are crawling over your car and you've got no idea of their background, who they socialise with, who they've mixed with or anything else. So really and truly, you're getting 4 or 5 different households in your car, cleaning that car with stuff that's not quite going to be the standard that we're telling you to use or advising you to use. So really and truly, the ADIs should be doing these cars.
Yeah, it could be a case of you pays your money, you take your chances with that one, because you can't guarantee that they've taken the full safety precautions and have the safety protocols in place that you would like to think that they had. It may be that we see car detailing firms, starting to try and reassure their customers that they have, but that is an unknown really when you're entering into those places. Can you make your own hand sanitizer? Because I'm just such an all-round good girl, I decided to do some research on this whilst I was writing this presentation last night. And as you can see on the photograph there, I decided to take one for the team and see if I could make it out of wine. And sadly, all the advice says you shouldn't be making your own and not out of your own alcohol. So I had to drink the wine instead. I'm such a martyr to this cause. It's not advisable. Homemade is not scientifically validated and tested to the standard of commercial hand sanitizers. It's one thing to say, well, I feel comfortable with it and I'm going to use it. I really wouldn't use it with your pupils. You're offering to them a product that has not been tested, that you can't manage the risk of and could cause damage to the pupil. And that could actually be a liability issue. because you're causing injury to them. And you know, unless you've asked them to sign a risk waiver to use your homemade sanitizer, I really wouldn't take that route. And it could cause more damage than it ever would be effective in limiting infection as well. So it's a no-no from us about making your own sanitizer to save a little bit of money. Antibacterial wipes and sprays. Obviously, Howard's already said you need those to clean them down. The advice is to make sure you bag and bin them after every single lesson. Change the bin bag, dispose of it responsibly. Just a quick point here on PPE. It's becoming another area of concern for our environment, all this PPE, because surgical masks are not easily recyclable. Quite a lot of them that are being used, quite a lot of the equipment, PPE equipment, isn't easily recyclable as well. So don't necessarily be putting these things in your recycling bin unless there is stuff on the packaging that tells you that they are recyclable. I think obviously an aftermath of us having to use all this stuff will be, you know, we've got a recycling problem, but it's kind of surgical waste, so it's harder to recycle. Bleach-free wipes are recommended, as we discussed earlier. Anything that is not bleach-free is going to cause problems such as fading and buckling in some extreme incidences to the plastic that is used in modern vehicles and to synthetic and leather seats as well. So that's one of the reasons that we say nothing that's got bleach in it. Spray, again, you avoid anything with bleach and ammonia. One of the brands that I did pick up in my research that is a multi-purpose, highly effective surface spray, it disinfects at the same time as cleaning, is one that you could look into. It supposedly eliminates 99% of known germs and continues to kill them 4 hours after application. Jim Milton suggested another brand that claims it can continue killing the infection and protect up to 10 hours. Jim, if you can hear me, just maybe pop the name of that brand back in the chat function if you can, so people can see that. The Sursol one that I've just talked about there, that's around $3.98 for 500 ml, and I found that on Amazon and also a lot of safety equipment supplier sites as well. So there's a variety of products out there. We're only picking out examples to give you an example of what they do and the kind of price range. We're not necessarily making a full list of recommendations because, you know, there's a lot of stuff coming to the market at this moment in time. There's a lot of differentials and pricing. So we might quote one thing and you can go away and think that's not very good advice. That's far more expensive than something else. So just do your research on that.
Charlie, before you go on, please, if I may. Martin's asked the same question twice here, so I want to give him an answer if I may. It's about what's the difference between the virus being on my bare arm or being on my sleeve, because I can wash or sanitize my hands and arms multiple times a day, but I won't wash the clothes at the end of the day. The reason we are saying that you ought to wear long sleeves is because it's medical advice from the chief medical officer, who has given this advice to the transport industry, where they have more than one person in a vehicle and also multiple people in a vehicle. You get a driver and different people working with them. And the advice to them has been not to have bare arms showing, simply because the access to water to wash your arms is not prolific on a road environment. And it is actually better in that instance, because you can't wash the hands away. It's for the stuff to stay in the clothes and wash the clothes at the end of the day. So as Kylie said earlier on, you can take your choice as to what you do, but we are giving you advice that we have that comes from a reputable source. And this is why we've mentioned it to you.
Okay, thanks for that, Howard. Disposable gloves are actually a big point of debate, with some people saying you shouldn't use them, yet we see lots of people using them. Where the advice to not use them in some respects comes, and it comes from the medical community, is the fact that people don't use them appropriately. So they go out, particularly in the supermarket environment, and they're going around, they're touching lots of things, and then they'll go to another shop and touch another load of things, and they're not necessarily changing their gloves in between. Not everybody also uses disposable gloves, I see. I mean, we almost see this. I've seen people in golfing gloves. I've seen people in biker gloves. I've seen people in woolly gloves. I had to tell my own 77-year-old mother up in Lancashire, who thought she was doing very well, to not be using her leather gloves as well, because they're not necessarily taking them home and cleaning them. And over time, particularly fabric and leather gloves can crack. It's very hard to clean them as bacteria gets into the cracks and things like that. So, if you're going to use them at all, has to be disposable and have to be changed on a frequent basis. So the experts are saying that gloves provide a false sense of security that bare hands do not. The psychology of this is, if you're looking at your bare hands, you're more aware of their risk. They feel more vulnerable. You're more likely to more frequently use hand sanitizer and good hand washing regimes. If you put the gloves on, you think you're okay, you go around and touch things, you're all right, Jack. Not everybody else necessarily is around you. And it reflects back to that how coronavirus is actually transmitted. It's kind of, the important thing is really stopping that spread of disease through coughing and sneezing and droplets, and making sure you have good hand hygiene. So that is why you get this mixed debate around whether gloves are useful. Some people also have a latex allergy, so check with your pupils and also check yourself that you're not going to be impacted by the glove. Go on.
If I can ask a question, if I may, please, Carly. You've got Tim's just actually mentioning this. If instructors source PPE, do we need to source multi-material products due to the allergic reaction to certain materials, as people can be allergic to, say, latex gloves, and even have them stored in the car can trigger reaction? What's the advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I put a massive caveat on this whole presentation. We've had to become, kind of expert amateurs, is the best way I describe it, in lots of different things at the moment. So we're not always the most expert place of advice for the intricacies of PPE. But generally, yes, the latex and I'm going to go into the types of glove you can get that are disposable, but latex is supposed to be the one that you get more issues with people reacting to them badly. And yes, indeed, a little bit like nuts, some people have such an extreme allergy to latex that it can be in the same room as them, and it can trigger their allergy as well. So it is worth checking. As we go into next week, we'll start to do more on risk assessment and risk management. And one of the things I think is probably wise for me to recommend to members going forward and provide checklists to do this is, in your new norm, doing medical questionnaires with pupils is something you're going to have to look at doing. Now, some of you may already do this, but it kind of has struck me for a while that I can go into a beautician's or a hairdresser for the first time and or a gym and have to complete a medical questionnaire that is as much about protecting their risk as it is about protecting mine. And asking a few key questions about pupils' health anyway is something we perhaps should be doing before we put them in our vehicle and under our care for the first time. So there's already a need for this, perhaps, to do a health questionnaire with pupils, ask them if they've got any severe allergies, ask them if they've got anything that would give them a risk in driving, all those kind of things. You're going to have to add to that in a way now if you're going to be using PPE that you think might have a detriment to their health as well. So have a think about it yourself, about what you should be asking, but we'll also be assembling some advice and some checklists and a template of the kind of questionnaire you could send out to your pupils before they even get in the car with you. That's another element of risk management.
I've got two more here, which I can answer at the same time, if I may, Carly. We've got the question here about the cost of all this stuff we've got to get.
Yeah.
How is it going to be reclaimed? Well, last week in the webinar we did last week, we did talk about costing out. And you may have to revisit the cost outs of your lessons to reflect this. The other question was, is the DIA able to produce packs? Well, the thing is, the DIA, unfortunately, has already been accused of trying to make money out of the COVID regime. And so we're between a rock and a hard place with this, really. Either we can try and put packs together for you to purchase from us, but then in the next vein get accused of trying to make money out of it. So
I'm not as bothered about the cashing in on COVID thing, because it's always the same people saying the same things, and I really fail to care. And that sounds really horrible because they're not necessarily our members anyway. But you'll never please some of those people, and they're always looking for an option. Why I would make a decision not to start doing this directly ourselves is because it's not our area of expertise. And if you do see people who were an ADI business yesterday or an ADI association yesterday, but now they're a PPE supplier, I would be a little bit kind of cynical of that, because the advice on these things changes all the time. It's not our point of expertise. So I don't think it's actually a good thing for us to start diversifying into this. It's also a distraction from what we actually do as a membership body. What I think the best option for me to do is find a supplier who will supply things for our membership, and they will supply them directly. That way, I know there are people who know what they're doing, dealing with it, and they are updating their products and strengthening their products as they learn, because that is their raison d'etre, that is their sole reason for existing, and they'll just do it better. So I think that is a better way of doing it, rather than us starting to have things coming in here. It actually would be quite an expensive process for us to handle the stuff here, then send it out, and then we'd have to put that cost on top. So I think the best value and the best servicing for members would be for us to find a supplier, put the items in our shop, but they will actually be going from another supplier who is able to get you the best pricing, the best servicing, the best quality of product, because they're buying on a big volume basis all the time, and they can negotiate better products at better prices. So that is why we're not necessarily going to start selling it direct, but we may be having it in the shop, but it will be sold by somebody else. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to ask you a question about some of the products actually you might be interested in as well in the moment. So on the disposable gloves here, the types of glove that you can get hold of are the rubber ones. Those tend to be a little bit thicker and harder wearing for people, but also not necessarily as sensitive to touch. They feel heavy on your hands. You feel a bit enclosed by wearing them, a bit sweatier. Then you've got latex, which we talked about. There's various grades of latex, so check the quality of the product. If it's I'll talk about on masks in a moment, that they should conform, and it's there on this slide. Any PPE should comply with either British standards, BS, or European norms, EN. So packaging and products should be clearly marked that they comply to BS or EN. And if they've got compliance to these standards, there's normally a uniform quality mark, which is the CE mark. So if you have a look at products you have in your own home already, there should be a CE mark which demonstrates that they comply with British standards or European norms. So look for that on all of your PPE. The problem is, at the moment, where there's a demand, there's a supply and a rush to supply, and that leads to dodgy operators and counterfeit goods coming into the marketplace. And counterfeit doesn't just mean somebody knocking out a Chanel logo that looks a bit wonky. It also means goods that don't comply with safety standards. So particularly in marketplaces online, really check what you're buying. Now, Amazon tries to have a quality control and tries to eradicate scammers from its network, but it's a hard job chasing these poachers through its system all the time. So Amazon is a place you can buy quality stuff that does comply, because there are genuine providers using Amazon to sell their goods. It's the world's biggest marketplace, but it can't completely promise you that it's eradicated any rogue operator. So just really be careful about what you're buying and look for those safety standards. If you have, or you think your pupils may be at risk of having an allergy, or you find latex or rubber is too tight to fit, you could consider using PVC gloves, which are made from a thin, lightweight plastic that is actually still quite durable. Now, PVC gloves tend to be the ones that you sometimes get given away from a dispenser in petrol stations. Is one of the few places I've seen them. It's a non-toxic material that's safe for food handling. It's used in a lot of food manufacture, and they've got a slightly textured feel to them. So not only do they feel lighter, they might also be better in terms of grip on the steering wheel and things like that as well. So that is an option for you to look at PVC. They're lighter. They come in, they come in the boxes just like the rubber and latex ones do, but you might actually get more for your money with a PVC. If you get a good quality one, don't necessarily think, oh, it feels light and flimsy, it can't be as good as the rubber and latex. Actually, the good quality ones are just as good, and they're used in other, safe and hygienic environments, so it does the job there. There is guidance on the web about, there's videos how to take them off, because gloves, one of the reasons the medical community warns against gloves in some respects, or says that they can be ineffective, is how people use them, i.e. not changing them and disposing of them frequently enough, but also how you even take them off. So on there, this is healthcare sector guidance of how to take the gloves off. I'm not going to go into it now, but go back and revisit that. And the same applies to things like surgical masks. It's ineffective if it's not being fitted properly. With respirators, it's ineffective if it's not being fitted properly. Don't blame the product, blame the user if it's not doing its job. So make sure you kind of take note of the guidance that is out there at the moment about how to use all of this PPE. I'm going to move on to face masks. We can deal with some of the questions about gloves at the end. You can use face masks. At the moment, it's it's up to you. It's discretionary. So somebody asked before, what is the DVSA advice about PPE? Do you know what? I optimistically asked this question yesterday. I was on a teleconference with them, and right at the end, I cheekily asked if they had PPE advice they were issuing to examiners. One, because I was interested, I wanted to know what it was and pass it on to you guys. Two, because I was being lazy and I was hoping that they would help me shortcut writing this presentation. But they supply their examiners with PPE, ergo they haven't actually got written advice on its usage. I kind of still would say to them, you should probably have written advice on its usage. You can supply it, but make sure you train people on how to use it. But DVSA haven't got anything they can share with us, hence we've had to do this ourselves. But again, face masks, the effectiveness varies depending on how you use them. At the moment, examiners have a choice whether they use them. It's not something that they have to wear during a driving test. We did send updated advice on use of face masks in DVSA's testing protocols as a member email a week or so ago. Pupils also have the choice if they want to wear them as well. So it's not obligatory for the examiner, not obligatory for the pupil. Ergo, it is not obligatory for you and it's not obligatory for your pupil. Your business, you decide what you want to do in terms of PPE for you and your pupil. As I said before, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. We might get some guidance coming from government in a few weeks' time that we have to wear masks. Spain, as I said, has moved to issuing that it should be compulsory to wear them in public spaces where social distancing cannot be achieved. So roll that forward into the UK. We may see that advice here. Masks are not recommended for children below the age of 2 or for anybody with respiratory issues. They can do more damage than they can help with in terms of those with respiratory issues. It is recommended for the wider population that you purchase fluid-resistant surgical masks and not the respiratory type masks. Now, this advice at the time was given because respiratory masks are more in need by medical workers. As more supply comes into the marketplace, that guidance might change and you might be able to access supply and use that. It's slightly contradicted because some driver training organisations are actually telling their drivers to use a respiratory standard mask, and I'll go on to that in a moment. Follow the guidance when applying any type of mask. Make sure you sanitize your hands thoroughly before putting it on and after disposing of. Ensure the nose and mouth are fully covered, no gaps between face and mask. Again, if you don't fit it properly, it's ineffective. If using the disposable ones, dispose of them after every lesson. Face masks are broken down into 2 main categories, surgical masks and respirators. I'll go into both types in a moment. And there's the medical masks compliance regime. So they have to comply with these European standards and have 3 levels of bacterial filtration efficiency. And respirators have their own set of standards as well. That is for medical settings. So the minimum that masks should adhere to in terms of standard in a medical setting. What is the latest advice? Well, the latest advice update on the 11th of May around face masks in this country, you can see there. The government in England says we should aim to wear face coverings on public transport and in some shops. In other enclosed spaces where social distancing is not always possible and you come into contact with people you don't normally meet. We know what social distancing means by now. It's 2 meters away or about the size of a cow, which is a good analogy. Face coverings should be worn and not surgical masks or respirators, which should be left for healthcare and other workers who need them. People do not need to wear face coverings when they're outdoors and exercising in schools, in workplaces such as offices and shops, where children under 2 or primary children cannot use them without assistance, or people who have problems breathing or wearing a face covering. Advice in Wales has not changed, and face coverings have not been recommended for the general public. In Northern Ireland, people have been told to wear face covering if they are in places where they cannot socially distance, and I believe the advice from government itself in Scotland is the same. So that's general advice to the general population on the wearing of face masks. Now, respirators, I noticed that Drive Tech have actually been recommending that their trainers wear the FFP2 masks, and also delegates, which obviously with Drive Tech will generally be fleet, should also be wearing the respirator type of mask, probably because they are anticipating the type of customer they will be training will be key workers, particularly in a logistics setting or in a paramedic setting. So maybe this is the reason why they're suggesting these ones. Fit and seal respirators are made of tangled fibers that are really effective at filtering the viruses in our air. So at the moment, COVID-19 is our biggest concern. But obviously, people in different contexts are encountering lots of different types of pathogens if they're working in a medical arena. They have to be fitted to a rigorous standard. That's why there's some nervous about saying that everybody should be having these respirators, because if somebody can't even put a surgical mask on properly, they might even struggle with a respirator, rendering it ineffective. So there's some information and advice about what is the standard for respirators there. I am no expert, so I'm not going to try and go into that there. We'll try and produce some guidance on respirators where we can. But what I'm thinking of doing actually as an update to this is asking one of the medical supply firms who we've been talking to recently for advice to maybe hop on another webinar on this or do a video for us where they can give more advice than we're able to go. Again, it's not our centre of expertise, so I don't want to be trusted with this information per se. So really, respirators are for those who are going to come into very close contact with those people who are known to be at risk. So they're generally used in the medical arena or in health and safety settings or manufacturing settings where there's going to be a known exposure to particles that could be damaging to the employee, i.e., metal filings or anything that comes out, glass, asbestos, all of those things. So generally, they're left there in that world. However, as I said before, Drive Tech are recommending, possibly because their people are going to be working with key workers, that they should be using one for the delegate and the trainer.
Carly, can I interrupt, please? We've got Sandra who said, what's the DIA stance on homemade face masks to avoid using the medical supplies, thinking about those being made at home, the double layered type? The situation with this really is, Sandra, is that there's nothing stopping you from making the things at home, but you have to appreciate that the clarity of speech when you're giving directions must be of paramount importance, and they must be in a situation where those that wear glasses, that they're not going to steam the glasses up. Now, the one way of getting rid of, Jenny's asked, how do I stop my glasses steaming up? There is an old-fashioned way of doing that, is to actually wash your glasses in washing up liquid and cold water, and then wipe them off thoroughly with a dry cloth. That tends to aid, it tends to stifle steaming up for some reason. I've got no reason why it is, but I remember I used to do it when I was younger, and it does work. But I don't know how long and how effective, whether that would be effective for a whole day or not. But it does have a good effect to start with.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Hannah. I've actually got a slide on homemade masks in a moment, so that might help as well. Surgical masks. There's various types of surgical masks, particularly disposable single-use masks cut into a rectangular shape with the pleats that cover your mouth, nose, and jawline. I've got some of those to show you in a moment. They're made of breathable fabric. This is, again, where you check your source standard and quality of PPE, because consumer research and medical research has shown the quality and the ability for the mask to filter the pathogens, the virus itself, varies widely, with reports ranging from 10 to 20%, depending on the quality of the mask. It's important to note that they're mainly designed to stop the wearer from infecting the surrounding environment. They're not effective at protecting the wearer from airborne diseases. So if we think that simply putting on a mask is going to do the job of protecting us only, it's not necessarily what surgical masks are designed for. They're designed to stop the caregiver or the surgeon, in the context they were originally designed for, from kind of passing it on, and also maybe getting blood splashes and things like that. But they also now wear visors to protect against those things as well. So, don't think that this is wearing a mask is a silver bullet against an airborne disease. There is some advice on a really good article.
Carly, sorry, we've got a lot of people that have lost sound.
Okay. Not sure why that is. Sound back on, everybody. If you can just say yes, if you can still hear me. Brilliant. I think Howard's been lost in the sound there, so sorry about that. I'm sure he'll try and get back on as we go.
No, I'm here. Sorry, I have my microphone turned off. It's okay.
Oh, Howard, no wonder we call you Captain Chaos. But then again, I'm no better than you these days. Don't know whether you've noticed that. I'm more Captain Chaos than you are. Okay, welcome back. If somebody did lose sound, so just carrying on with face masks. This was from an article that I found in the Daily Mail, which was quite good because it gave you some advice on pricing as well and the types of mask. So there are different grades of mask. What they call the high-grade dust masks are now used on the NHS frontline. They're FFP3 masks. You can see how I'm going to be so good on a pub quiz on this once I've learned all this stuff. Generally costing around £40 for two. These are the ones that have the little air filter in them. They are the gold standard for preventing airborne diseases. They got to fit tightly to the face. They have all the air drawn through that filter, normally that little round white plastic thing that's embedded in the fabric, and they catch almost every kind of particle as the air flows through. So they're protecting the user and they're protecting the patient or pupil in your case as well. They were primarily used before this as dust masks in the construction industry. So you saw the NHS actually doing quite a lot of appeals for PPE to other trades and other industries during this crisis who already use protective equipment in their job. These masks are not necessarily widely available to the public online, and when they do become available, they sell out quite quickly. So if you do want to use them, keep your eyes on them. They're not cheap, clearly for a reason. They're more protective. Around about £39.99 for a pack of two on Amazon. If you find them cheaper, go get them. But again, check the quality, check they conform to the safety standards that we've talked about as well. At the start of the crisis, there was a discouragement of people who didn't need them from
Okay, I don't know if anybody can hear me. This is Howard. We've lost Charlie at the moment, but is anyone still able to hear me? There's some people that can hear me, but we've lost Charlie completely. So if those of you can hear me, I will carry on with what Charlie's been saying. She's been talking about the respirators. So talking about the respirators and surgical masks, etc. That's where we got to. Various types of surgical masks, mainly disposable. But in a situation where we have disposable ones, we have to be careful of how we dispose of them, how we take them off, and also be careful of the touching of them as well. So I'm sorry you haven't got the side of the picture. I haven't got the picture either. It looks like we've got another problem with the Zoho scheme at the moment. So let me carry on if I can. We've got a few more slides to go through here. Um, there are different grades of face masks, those that can hear me. The high-grade dust masks, which can be used on NHS frontline, meet the FFP3 standard. Um, we don't really want you to use those if we can help it, because obviously the health service need those themselves. So they're what they call the gold standard, and they help to prevent the airborne. And I saw a question a minute ago, someone asking about whether it was actually airborne, whether COVID-19 is airborne. It is. There was a report came through from the Netherlands about 4 weeks ago that they did tests in supermarkets with people sneezing, and the sneeze droplets were detected from one aisle across the top of the shelves to another. So it is definitely airborne. So we do need to be aware of that. So yes, airborne is definitely. So masks, if you're going to use them, they do need to be of a caliber that will help prevent the droplets spreading from talking. It can be up to about 12 meters that it can spread, especially sneezing. So it is definitely a situation of if you're wearing masks, that you wash your hands before putting them on, and you don't keep taking them on and off if you can help it. That's a bit of the advice from the chief medical officer. Now I know you've got a lot of you can't hear anything at all, so I don't know how many people I've lost, but I'll keep going anyway, because it's going to be a benefit for you for us to carry on. So I'm sorry about the technical problems we've got. Continuing with the silver standard masks, these are manufactured in the UK and in the United States. They're about $6.99 each, and known as the N95 face mask, which meets the FFP2 standard for Europe. And these are the ones that the World Health Organization are saying are the lowest grade for medical use. Again, because they are for medical use, ideally we don't want to get hold of those if we can. We've got to ensure that we keep those for the medical environment if we can. So disposable surgical masks in most hospitals can be got for £9.39 for 10. NHS use them. So again, if we find anything that is marked as, what is it? The COVID-19 virus mask for NHS, if you see those advertised, ideally best to leave those alone. Now, there are things like cycling masks that can filter pollution. They have a potential to stop viruses. What you've had to associate with the mask is it's not you ingressing it through breathing it in, it's what comes out, what you exhale and what comes out of you. So with the masks, the face masks, the standard you're looking for, if you can get them for like the cycling masks, they'll be okay. You'd need to adjust the nose band, etc., for people that wear glasses to make sure that they don't steam up. And if the student comes to you in the car with a mask, I wouldn't say don't wear it, because one thing that is being told by the medical officers again as well is where social distancing cannot be created, which i.e. your car, it can't be, that you shouldn't face the person you're talking to. You should face the front in order to help reduce the exhaling and droplets coming from the person that's talking. So if your student has got a mask on and they are facing the front, it is actually going to be helping you to be protected. But we must take consideration of if they start to get a bit warm, that you will have to put more frequent stops in the drive, in the training, for them to be able to readjust themselves to be able to maintain breathing. Window would obviously need to be down so they can keep their temperature. They can keep their temperature to a constant level where it should be to be comfortable. So we are looking at certain aspects to put planning into your lessons, that more frequent stops might be required. Now, we're looking at where we can get some of these things from. Just give me a second here, because I'm looking at a second computer. That's why I can see things and you can't. There are masks available, cycling masks available from Amazon on the site, with the site's bestseller at £7.57 for a pack of 6 from a company called DI. It's DIYII, which are based in China. They are good for those with sensitive skin allergies and can be washed repeatedly. I don't know how many times it can be washed, but it can be washed repeatedly, and also
all those kind of things, not washing them effectively enough. So that's why there may be advice from the healthcare community that you're better off with disposables, because you'll make sure you frequently change them. And they know what the construction and the quality of most of these is. A homemade one, who knows how effective that really is. It's not been tested scientifically. So really, for professionals, disposable face masks are going to be...
claims that they can deliver those within 2 weeks. So there are things available that can be purchased. We haven't got places lined up at all. Carly's back. We haven't got places that are lined up per se in order to deliver to us to supply you. So that is something that we need to build up. The reason I'm talking, Carly, if you can hear me, is that a lot of people, we didn't lose sound on all of them. Although we lost sound with you and we lost screen, I'm now on slide 31.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. Don't know what happened there. I was just chatting away to myself. So what's the title of that slide, Howard, for you?
types of surgical masks. It's types of surgical mask, and it's
Okay,
slide
so
31.
if I just
So I've just finished slide 30. You're going to start on
so
slide
is that the
31.
types of surgical masks? Because the presenter view isn't numbered in terms of the slides.
That's it. Well, what's the difference between type 1, type 2? The one you're showing now
no
is the one
problem.
you're
So
on.
basically, just to reiterate for those who might have lost that slide, you can see the information there about type 1 and type 2 masks. A type 2 mask tends to have 3-ply construction, and that generally is the baseline of masks that people should be wearing if you're going to be working in close proximity with someone who may be at risk of having an infectious disease. So really, in your world, I would say a 3-ply construction type 2 mask is probably the one that we would recommend to you. Again, we're not the experts in this, but this is just going off of the advice that we're reading. These type 2 masks are pleated style with ear loops or ties, 3-ply, so 3 layers of protection, and available in a variety of colours and styles if that's what floats your boat. But it's that 3-ply nature that makes them more protective. If I go on to a type 2R face mask, a type 2R medical mask, which have a 4-ply construction, so that extra layer that prevents large particles from reaching patients or working surfaces. I'll leave you to read this at your own leisure and more information about that. But generally, again, a 4-ply construction is what people in the NHS will tend to wear. Pleat style again, protective 4-layer construction. It's splash resistance against bodily fluids as well. So that's why it's offering more protection than the other types. I've just covered homemade. For those who are still online and heard it, sorry that you'll hear this again now, but people have got a lot of questions about that. It's a bit like gloves. There is debate about how useful homemade masks are. Obviously, homemade masks have not been tested for their quality and their efficacy in any way. So, it's impossible for anybody to say they're brilliant, yes, go for it, or don't use them at all. The argument made by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control is they could help to limit transmission, but again, they can't say in every case. The argument against is a bit like gloves, is that people have that false sense of security and they just keep it on all the time and they don't frequently change it. They just think, well, I'll just take it home tonight and I'll wash it and that'll be fine. If you're wearing disposables, you're more likely to change them more frequently in between your pupils. So the advice might be with homemade ones, you're supposed to change them frequently. So if you're going to take them, you might have to take several of them in the car with you on a working day, where making them at home might seem like a better option because you'll save money, but you're going to have to make sure you have a supply of them for your lessons as well. So that's the advice about homemade ones there. So just be aware of the limitations and the fact that they should be washed and changed frequently. So where you might save money by making your own, you might going to be spending more of your time washing all of these items rather than just throwing them away. Face shields, again, I'll demonstrate some types of those in a moment. I'm just going to go through the slides first so we don't have to keep going back and forth from the slides to the video. When in the early part of the disease cycle, there was a lot of advice on using masks to stop transmission. Those in healthcare settings only offer you some layer of protection. So one of the most effective ways in stopping the viral spread for those who are in very close proximity to the risk is having a face shield that extends below the chin. So, if you go into your supermarkets now, you're starting to see people that are belt and braces. They've got face masks on and they've got a visor as well. The problem that I can see with some of the face shields that are on the market is well, as you'll see in a moment when I put them on, they're not that great for communication purposes, as neither is a mask. I don't think a lot of people would feel comfortable about wearing one all day. It's a very unreal experience. So it could be that your pupils struggle with wearing one. It gets hot quite quickly, it gets hot and foggy. So you have to invest in something that is a good quality. They are endlessly reusable, so there is an advantage to them. You can simply kind of clean them with soap and water and give them a quick spray over. They can be more comfortable. The one I've got here that I'll show you in a moment has got a foam around it, so it doesn't hurt you as much around the head. And it does work psychologically because it stops people from touching their faces as often, which is one of the main issues with COVID, is people touching their faces and exposing themselves to it. I know I've been told off by some of you on our seminars that you can see me touching my face when I'm doing things. And people tend to pull down the surgical mask when they're speaking, and you don't have to do that with a face shield. So that's one of the reasons that there is some advice that face shields, maybe in combination with face masks or on their own, might be better, because you're not going to keep tipping up your face shield, whereas you might have a tendency to kind of keep pulling down your face mask to speak. And also the face shield will allow you to speak a lot more than a face mask will, and more clearly. Also allows you to show that range of facial expressions, and lip movements are important for people who are hard of hearing to be able to understand how you're communicating to them as well. But the problem for you guys is a lot of this advice on face shield also includes the advice that you should be trying to stand directly facing people, not to their side. And in your job, you're going to be face at the side of somebody most of the time, not face on. And if you'll notice when I put this on in a moment, some of these face shields don't adequately cover you right around the edges of your face. So they're still allowing a chink in your armor that if somebody coughed, droplets may go through. So that's maybe why in some driving professions and in some settings, people are wearing the surgical mask and the face shield, because they can't always be face on with their client or somebody that they're interfacing with. Clothing, we talked about clothing quite a lot today in terms of the protection of arms and things. Wearing clothing that's appropriate and covers as much of you as possible, including arms and legs. We've already had that discussion. Washing your clothing as soon as you finish work for the day. Drop your drawers at the door, as I say. Put them in a cotton bag. This is advice that NHS and frontline workers are given, is if you've got one of those cotton bags, shopper bags, or the drawstring little pump bags as we knew them, those of a certain generation when we used to do PE, or put them in a pillowcase, and only wash those clothes together in a wash on their own, as Howard said, around about 40 or higher, and using a good detergent in there. That is something that we suggest is done every single day when you come in from work. Aprons are an option you could use in the car, mainly for cleaning the car more than anything, to protect your clothing rather than sitting there in an apron all day. They should be disposable. Really, if you're going to use a material version, again, you're just adding to the washing that you're going to need to do each day as well. So if you're only going to use them for cleaning the car, having a stock of disposable ones might be better than having to do so much washing as well. I haven't got a picture of this at the moment, and I'll try and update that when we send out other guidance. People have asked us about the sneeze shields of cars, and what I mean by this is a protective barrier between you and the pupil. The jury is still out on these. There are shields on the market. They're either called cough shields or sneeze shields. They're sometimes called driver partitions. They really are at the moment sold mainly for the taxi market, and they can either go across the back of the front two passenger seats, but there are versions that are built around the driver's seat more so to protect the taxi driver from being attacked than anything else. So they tend to be made out of a clear perspex. Those aren't manufactured at the moment with any cutting in them, any hole cut in them, other than maybe for money to go through. So one of the reasons the jury's out in them is there aren't many products at the moment that have been really rigorously tested in how good they are for you to be able to take evasive control. So there are products coming to the market, and I've certainly been contacted by a number of manufacturers about developing something specific for ADIs. One company I spoke to who specialize in taxis, so they're thinking of doing it. They can do it already. The problem with their product is it has to be fitted, because it's perspex. The perspex ones have to be fitted to the car, to the type of car. So it's not necessarily a bespoke fitting to your individual car, but they do need to fit them to a brand of car, and it changes between brand how they're fitted. So that leads to those solutions being quite costly. This company I was talking to quoted $450 for the perspex one that goes into the car. I'm sure you'll see cheaper things come onto the market. That's inevitable. But again, it's that whole issue of, is the hole that gets cutting them by these manufacturers going to be big enough for you to take evasive action? It can't just be a hole that's the kind of width of your arm. It's got to be a space that is big enough for you to maneuver your arm around it in an emergency situation and be able to grab the steering wheel, the handbrake if necessary, things like that. And there's a thought process here that is the size of hole you're going to have to cut in that shield going to be so big, it kind of renders it useless in terms of preventing disease control, because if somebody coughs, the particles could still travel through what might be a sizable hole in that screen. It's also another surface in your car to have to keep clean. You know, COVID-19 likes to sit on surfaces and can sit there for up to 72 hours, it's thought, so on some surfaces. So it's another surface you're going to have to keep clean in your vehicle. There is another type, a PVC type, and the best I can liken it to for you is it's like a shower curtain basically, and it velcros to the ceiling, the fabric ceiling in your car, and then velcros around the bottom, around the driver's seat as well. Again, at the moment you'll be able to find those on Amazon. They're normally found on a search on driver partition. And those are designed for, again, for the taxi market. So I believe there are people who are offering to provide these to ADIs, and again, they're going to cut a hole in them. But it sounds a bit shoddy to me. I'm not sure about the quality of that. I haven't had samples of it yet. We've not been able to test it. They won't have been through necessarily any safety testing in our setting yet. So I would approach these sneeze shields and partitions with some caution. And if you do look at buying one, really interrogate the manufacturer about how they've trialed it in your setting and how it's going to work in terms of taking evasive action. Initially, insurers were telling us they didn't really have a problem with them, but that's because they too had not really thought through what you do for a living and that need for evasive action. Surprisingly, even in the trading car market, they hadn't necessarily thought it through in terms of evasive action. And they were seeing it at first as, is it a modification to the vehicle, and is that a problem from an insurance point of view? So some insurers initially said, no, if it's not too much of a modification to the vehicle, not too much of a problem. I know our insurers come back to us now and said, we're more worried now about the evasive action. We've not seen enough products that satisfy us evasive action can be taken quickly. So we're not actually sure about the insurance implications. We're going to have to investigate it further, look at a few more examples of these and see whether we're happy to do that. So, you know, if you are thinking about these things, i.e. check whether they're going to actually be useful and safe for you to use, but also check that your insurer is happy that you're using one and it's not going to nullify your insurance in some way. And as I said, there are manufacturers that are looking to adapt them to the ADI market. So I'm sure we'll see more people offering these things to the markets. So I think my advice was, I'm not sure I would rush out and get one if I was with you guys. Howard, what would you say about that?
Sorry, I didn't have the switch on then. I would say that I would always be worried about the airbags going off, because if the airbag detonates, the speed it comes out with those things in the way, it's going to deflect the airbag and cause a lot of or could possibly cause injury as well. So it's all very well the insurance companies bagging on about, oh, it's an adaptation to the vehicle. What they haven't thought of is if the airbag goes off, who's going to clear the blinking
I'm
mess
not
up?
fully confident, folks. The insurers have actually had the opportunity to fully interrogate the implications of these sneeze shields, these driver partitions. Now, you know, don't think because insurance is a regulated industry that, you know, they're always going to tell you the absolute 100% cast iron, you know, bottomed advice, and it's going to be absolutely that, you know, unchallengeable when they say it. Sometimes in a sales process, and that's why the regulators have to keep a watch on this, insurers will make an undertaking that isn't necessarily something that they can follow through on, or they fully understand the implications or the risks when they're making that undertaking. So if you have an insurer saying, yeah, it's okay, go ahead, just really interrogate that they've done their homework there and that they fully tested these things. Because at the moment, I haven't seen a trial of any type of driver partition in the ADI. Well, please correct me if I'm wrong. That might have happened, but this is a nascent product for this industry, so it hasn't been tested rigorously yet in terms of how you will use it. There may have been driver partitions tested for the taxi market where these fears have been, you know, kind of assuaged in some way, but we've got the added complexity here of you having to have that cut through and something that will help you take evasive control. So again, be very cautious about using these at this moment in time. And, the fact that your insurers might say to get you on policy that it's okay and keep you on policy, but then when you find you have to make a claim that involves it, that it's a very different story, especially in a universe where insurance is going to get a lot more fraught, as the insurance industry has a huge hit on its bottom line through all the claims on it, and it starts restricting its cover, restricting payouts, restricting its book in terms of what it will cover as well. Anything else you want to add on that, Howard? Because you're more expert in knowing, what the implications are.
No, I think you've covered that quite nicely.
Okay. So, guys, we will keep you posted on that sneeze shield topic. And as products develop and we've got the chance to assess them and encourage those manufacturers to put them to a more rigorous trial, if we think there is something that's usable, we will let you know about it. Just a bit of market research here for a moment. One product I have been offered is, and it's a topic I'll briefly cover as well, is a pack for pupils more so than you. You will probably buy, if you're going to buy surgical masks in bulk, you'll probably buy boxes of masks. You can buy them at 50 masks a time. Your own face visors, you can buy those in single packs, or you can buy them in packs of 10. But for your pupils, in terms of pupil confidence, do you want to be able to offer them something that comes in a sealed pack and has everything in it? So there is a US manufacturer who's already started doing a packaged product. And a distributor in the UK has offered us the opportunity to market it. It's not something we want to get involved in directly. I'm just canvassing opinion here. What it is a sealed pack, a sachet you can hopefully see on the screen there. And in that sachet will be a 3 or 4 ply surgical mask. It will have antibacterial wipes, and it'll have gloves, and you can buy them in a box that has 3 or 4 in a pack. It's just a kind of, would you see that as something you can keep in the car for those students who don't turn up wearing their own product? The problem with this is, one, I see it's quite pricey at the moment because it's a new packaged product, and I think it's about £3 or £4 per pack. So it's something you'd probably have to charge the pupil for if you had. They will become cheaper over time as products flood the market. People copy them. There's more of them. They will become more, accessible in terms of price. It's just these guys have been the first so far to think about putting it all in one kit, and it's a confidence thing. I think they're playing on the customer insecurity that if you give them a mask, people might look at you and think, "Where's that been?" They sit in a box in the boot and they get a bit dusty. Are they confident that they're clean? If they get a sealed pack given to them, if they've forgotten their own PPE, does that give a greater sense of confidence to people? It's things that you need to discuss internally with yourself and your trainers if you're using a driving school. Are you going to carry PPE if you're insisting that pupils come with it, just in case they don't? Are you going to stipulate to your pupils that they have to provide their own PPE? If you do provide it for the occasions that pupils don't bring their own, are you going to charge it? I spoke to an instructor yesterday that said, I'm going to charge them on top if they don't bring their masks and their own hand gel. What are you going to do with your pupils basically around PPE? What level are you going to specify they have to have? What do you do if they don't bring it? Or are you just going to carry some around in your boot just in case? You have to factor those things into your own decision making about your costs, what you're going to have, what you're going to have on board, and what bulk you buy in as well. So, but that's just an option that's coming to market at the moment, is these pre-packaged gloves, mask, and wipes in one thing that you can just hand over to your pupils. However, if these things are too expensive, you could pre-package things in little, kind of food bag type things or hygiene bags yourself and put them in a box in the back of your car so you can hand the little kit to your pupils. You can make it up yourself out of buying a bulk pack of sterilizing wipes, buying the gloves, buying the mask, but put it all in a handy little kit, as I said, in a little kind of food bag type thing, put it in the back, and then the pupil feels like they've got something that's been sealed and not been tampered with. That might be something you want to do as well. But again, that's at your own discretion and not for us to say. So just before I go on to that bit there, I'm going to do this and do this. So I said to you before that I've got some samples of some kit that we got in, and it's not necessary to recommend this kit in any way or to plug a certain brand. It's more to show you some of the difficulties that you have with these things. So I'm just going to show you now. This is a face visor. As you can see, this is what I bought off Amazon. This was about £7. I think it was a 2-pack. The reason it's slightly more expensive is, can you see it's got foam in there? And that is designed to protect your forehead. A lot of the cheaper ones online don't have that foam in there. So you've got to think, if you're going to use these at all in your work, it's going to be a long day with that sweaty strip of plastic on your forehead, and it may be a bit uncomfortable. So you might want to go for these or make your own adaptation at home with the foam. Just to demonstrate to you, as soon as I put this on, it's definitely a surreal experience for me wearing it, talking to somebody. You probably noted that it's different in terms of my tone of voice as well. It's certainly quite warm, even just being sat here in the office. So imagine being in a car. I know your car's going to be ventilated a lot more and you'll have the windows open a lot more, but it's not particularly pleasant experience. So, maybe get some of this stock in and see how you feel about wearing it. Now, just to demonstrate, by the way, wait, when we talk about quality, can I just tell you something here? My partner bought these for his family the other day, and they arrived. He said, "Why don't you take some of these in? Because the office stocks haven't arrived yet, and so you can demonstrate them." He really values our health and safety and well-being really highly. As you can tell, no safety marks on this packaging at all. Nothing I could read because it's in Chinese. He's clearly clicked on the cheapest item he could find for us. So I wouldn't recommend these ones particularly, but I don't think these ones are going to be 3-ply. I'd be surprised if these are 2-ply, but it just shows you, just to demonstrate. I'm going to put this on now. One, how automatically it's making it difficult for you to relate to me as a person. You know me already, most of you, but if this was a pupil for the first time meeting their instructor, it's quite uncomfortable. I'm actually breathing it in. So it's quite, when you're talking, it's quite uncomfortable. It's not fitted properly, somebody might know, but this is actually more or less where you'd have to have it fitted, fully drawn up on the nose, tucked in under the chin, making sure that it is actually near as your skin as it can, so you haven't got any, that would obviously be ineffective. And so with that, if your temptation is also going to be that you're going to keep doing that to speak to somebody, that's going to be a problem. So let's now try it with the face shield. Give you a good level of entertainment here, if nothing else. And as you can see, this could be your new normal, folks. And I can tell you already, it was hot and sweaty with the face shield on, and it's certainly a lot hotter and sweatier with the mask on. It's also quite hard to relate to me. I'm a glasses wearer, and I'm fogging up there as well. So I think you're just going to have to find your way of getting either comfortable with this and finding ways that will work well for you, or it's a case of, do you use the face shield because it allows a little bit more air. This one isn't too bad at covering me to the side, but as you can see with this one, it's not coming around the full way. So if you're a medical or supermarket worker and you can be facing somebody head on for most of the time, it might be okay. Because of your job, obviously you need to check that the one that you use is giving you enough coverage from the side here, which is where you're going to spend a lot of your life with the people as well. So I just wanted to give you, if you haven't had the chance to get hold of some of this stuff yet, an indication of kind of feel of the thing and how it feels to you when someone's trying to communicate to you with all this gear on. As you can see, it's not particularly great. And I know if you've been in a supermarket recently, you will have struggled with some of this stuff as well. I actually bought this one as a novelty item, really more so than anything else. But we actually tried it on in the office yesterday. And for those of you who are interested, there might even be branding opportunities for this. This is off Amazon as well. And actually, when we put it on, and this is detachable. So this is, you wear your baseball cap, company branding, and then you clip it back on. You can buy extra covers for this as well. This actually was giving us, when we tried it yesterday, more coverage. I'm going to take it off whilst I speak. More coverage around the sides of the head. But as you noticed there, when I was talking to you, it was like I was talking to you a little bit more out of the bottom of a bottle. So it's not necessarily anything that would be used in a medical arena, but this actually does offer more protection around the sides of the face obviously more fashion conscious as well. They can be washed and cleaned and taken apart and things like that. But it feels a bit cooler to wear, but it also felt like it was harder to communicate using that as well. So I think it's maybe get some of the kit if you can get hold of it now, if you haven't, and just practice how you feel about wearing it and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Because again, as we keep saying, if you're going to wear PPE, this is going to become your new normal. Anything for you to add there, Howard?
No, you're doing it. You're doing nicely, Carrie. You just carry on. You're doing
I'm
your
not going to
fancy
get a
dress
job
very
on
well indeed.
QVC anytime soon, I don't think, for this one. But I just thought I would, show you some of the communication issues I have. Just to go back to the presentation for a moment here. There is some guidance on this presentation. Can everybody see the slides again, just to make sure you've got the slides?
No, there's no slides currently at the moment.
Okay, can everybody still hear me? Howard's just disappeared on his link.
Yeah, I'm back on now. My link's dropping out a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, I'm back.
Can everybody hear me?
I'm looking in the chat and I'm getting.
Right, I'm just going to type a chat for everybody. Sorry, folks, if you are still on, we're just having some problems with the IT. You can hear me. All right, so looks like we're back on. So can everybody hear me again? Can I have a few more yeses so you can hear me? Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. Can I also have did you see, those of you who dropped off, did you see me doing the demonstration of the gear? Okay,
Right,
slides are back on. Okay,
Carly.
sorry if people just dropped out just then. Not sure what happened. We'll talk to the IT team to see what's happening with this platform today, because it's not performing as best and it let us down last week as well. So we might have to switch to a different platform for future webinars. But all you missed really was, for those of you who have dropped back in, is me goofing around really with the personal protection gear that we had. So what I used was the face shield and a surgical mask, and also a face shield that attaches to a baseball cap as well as a more novelty item. Obviously, when you watch the presentation back in the academy, you'll be able to see all of that video as well on there, because it records everything. We're coming to the end of the presentation now. Thanks for bearing with us. It's been a very long one today because it's a lot of information. That's why we will put these slides up for you to use in conjunction with watching the presentation. I think what we'll try and do as well is maybe do a video on the different types of PPE, so you can watch that at your leisure. Get somebody who is actually a supplier of this product to do some demos for us. But there is stuff online that you can use that gives you a demo as well. Some useful guides I wanted to just leave you with, that's on the slides too. There's some really good advice in a document on gov.uk, working safely during coronavirus, COVID-19, in vehicles. This is guides for people who work in or from vehicles, including couriers, mobile workers, lorry drivers, and other work vehicles. Now, you would have thought that with this maybe would be a natural place to make reference to driver trainers, but that passed whoever wrote this document by. However, it doesn't mean that their advice, it hasn't got some useful points in it for you. So if you follow that link, when we put the slides themselves into the academy, you'll find that document. It's got a lot of advice on type of PPE, keeping the work environment clean, general advice on how to manage COVID-19 as a driver or somebody who works in a driving situation. There is also a PPE hub, I've noticed now, on gov.uk, which is where government will publish its most updated guidance about personal protective equipment. So again, the link is on that slide. If you want to keep abreast of that, that has the latest government advice on PPE. I found some really useful guidance on the World Health Organization's site on using masks. But if you actually go to that link, it also has a lot of their other resources about PPE on there as well. So, check on the WHO site for a lot of useful downloadable flyers and advice that you could use yourself, but also maybe give your pupils as some briefing notes before they join you for their first lesson. Are there any further questions? I know it's been an exhausting webinar today, and there's been a few problems with it, so sorry about that. But is there anything burning that people want to ask now? We are here to advise, obviously, throughout this period, and we'll be trying to send out static resources like checklists and stuff as soon as we compile them. But is there anything burning that people want to ask us now? Barbara's got a question, not on the subject of PPE, but a very relevant question. Broadly, yes, the advice from DVSA at the moment on this is the going back to work, the $1 million question we have, the going back to work question. Broadly, yes, the government advice is that they are only recommending key workers who have a critical worker test booked are the ones that get training at the moment. That is DVSA's viewpoint, that you should be only training a key worker that has a critical worker test booked. However, they do acknowledge that there will be people who are needing training, who are a key worker, that do not have a test book because they're already a full license holder and they need the training to develop their ability to drive a different class of vehicle. So, for example, that might be somebody who has a full license for Category B now, but is going to be driving something like a van, which they can on their Cat B, but they need some development to be able to drive that vehicle. So they are aware and they do acknowledge that there is training going to go on with key workers that does not result in a critical worker test. So it is guidance, it is recommendations. As I've said before, and people can take this away and construe it how they want. This is not DIA saying, yeah, go back to work tomorrow, no problems. It is us sticking to the facts. There's nothing technically or legally to prevent you going back on the road tomorrow. It is guidance, however, and a recommendation that to mitigate the risks of further spread of COVID-19, to mitigate the risk to you, your pupils, and the general population, that the amount of training that happens at this time is limited to key workers who have an essential need to learn to drive at this time. We do recognise it is a discretion of an individual business to make decisions about when they go back, and you do so at your own risk at this moment in time. If people are doing work that is essential, they do essentially need to go back to work on the road. We will do our best to support and guide those individuals. There's a date that's been bandied around, the fact of the date of the 4th of July. The only way that date is firm is in America because it's Independence Day. So it's not a drop dead date. Everybody definitely goes back to work there. It's an anticipated time period at which people may return to doing normal driver training. The problem with that date is, for those people who have pupils who've been given a test date at the start of July, it does not allow for you, if you were to work on that date, to be able to get those pupils ready for that test. So I asked DVSA yesterday, with those people who've got tests booked in very early July or even the end of June, is it not that we should be supporting those people in going back a week or 2 weeks earlier? Because it's got to be that we support people safely training people to safely pass the test and drive on the other side. DVSA do acknowledge that there will be trainers who have those early test dates, those people who will need to get back on the road a couple of weeks before that test, because they do want you to still consider the pupils' safety in terms of driving and their examiner's safety and going on test. So if you have got tests at the end of June, it is anticipated, if the trajectory for lockdown easing stays the same, if we stay on the same path in terms of infection rates slowing, the R rate staying at a certain level, DVSA are working on the basis that those tests that they're giving out now will go ahead. Obviously, there's things that will damage that ability, which is examiner sickness, all of those kind of things, but they are, working on that being the plan. They're going to review at the end of May where we are, i.e. they, like us, have to wait for further government guidance on whether lockdown is being eased or broken. So if it's being eased or extended, if it's extended, clearly test dates will go back again. If lockdown continues to be eased and it is eased further as anticipated, those test dates will hopefully go ahead. So if you do have pupils who are going to be going for tests in early July, end of June, you can make contact with them now and talk about setting up dates, perhaps from mid-June, to start that training with those pupils, because if they've not been on the road for a long time, they will inevitably need at least 2 weeks of training to get them back out of mothballs, as it were, with their knowledge. So I haven't got a clear drop dead date in the stand. It is just that anticipation that driving instructors fall into phase 3 of people returning to work, and that will be a safer time for people to return. But the caveat is, if you have pupils with earlier test dates, it is advice that you should be preparing those pupils as best you can, so taking them out for a few lessons before their test date. So that will mean some people will go back to work sooner than others. So apologies, I haven't got a absolute answer on that. Everything is up for review at this moment in time. But speaking to DVSA yesterday, they anticipated being able to deliver those tests at the end of June, early July, if lockdown continues to ease in the manner that it is. It's only if we have a government decision to extend lockdown or return to a much more stringent stage of lockdown as well. Okay, so I'm going to cut that there because it's been nearly 2 hours doing that. And so you're all sick of the sound of my voice. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties we've had today. Luckily, they don't, even though they've disrupted your experience, they don't disrupt the recording of it. So everything that we've been talking about when you lost connection is going to still be there on the video for you. As I said, I'll also put the slide deck up there for people as well. And watch out, DIA members, for more guidance on these issues as we actually develop our knowledge of what works and what doesn't, what's needed and what isn't. So all that remains for me to say is thanks for attending, everybody. Hope it was useful, and we hope to see you soon. Stay safe, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Yeah. Good bank holiday weekend.
Thanks, everyone.